and welcome back. Today I'll be showing you how to make an 8-foot cutting guide that will allow you to cut full sheet good materials very easily. This guide will cost you roughly $30 to make, and I venture to say it'll be one of the most beneficial tools you'll have around your shop. I know it definitely has been for us. So what do you need to get started? Well, the first thing you're going to need is at least an 8-foot long straight edge. For this, I'm choosing to use a 5/8 inch pre-primed MDF molding board at 5.5 inches wide. I also chose to buy a 10-foot length instead of an 8-foot length. That way I can make the cutting guide a couple inches longer, and I have some left over to make a shorter version of the guide at a later date. This also comes in handy. The second thing you're going to need is some form of a hardboard. After sourcing different options, I found that going with the basic whiteboard material was actually the least expensive, and when you're done making the guide, you can use your scrap as a shop whiteboard. Lastly, you're going to need some wood glue and some 5/8 inch finishing nails or brad nails if you have a nail gun. So let's get started. First, you want to start out by laying out your materials. If you're using a whiteboard like I am, make sure that the whiteboard side is face up. For your straight edge, if you're using a molding strip that has rounded corners, make sure that those are face down. Then, you want to go ahead and measure the distance from the saw blade to the edge of your saw. I'm using a skill saw which happens to measure at 4 inches. Add an extra inch to that and go ahead and mark from the edge in at the top and bottom of your whiteboard as a reference line. Now we're going to go ahead and add the glue to our straight edge. That way we can move the whiteboard on top of it and start fastening our cutting guide together. Make sure you stay in from the edges and go in a wave pattern. Now we're going to go ahead and lift the whiteboard on top, making sure that it lines up with our reference lines that we previously marked. Now I used a paint stick earlier and I marked out exactly where the board underneath is going to line up. That way I have a reference for putting in the nails. And then go ahead and fill in. So once all the nails are in, we're going to let this sit for a little bit, let the glue dry, and then we'll come back and finish it off. Now that the glue's had a chance to set, we went ahead and flipped our jig over and clamped it down to our table. I'm going to go ahead and cut off this one side so it matches the skill saw. As you're cutting, make sure that you press down and in towards the guide so you get a nice straight and clean cut. Now I've cut the one side. Now we can go ahead and do the same thing on the other side, but also feel free to use the other side for another tool, such as a router. So now we have our 8-foot cutting guide. let me give you some tips on how to use it. When you go to mark your material for cutting, mark each end of the material and shift your cutting guide so that the edge splits the line on each end, making sure that the guide is clamped down to the side of the material that you wish to keep. Then, when you go to cut the material, make sure that your saw is vertical and that you're pushing in towards the guide. This will also help to prevent nicking of the guide, which may eventually happen, but it's a cheap jig to replace. I hope this was helpful, and stay tuned for tomorrow's jig on Jig Week at DIYProjectBlog.com. Have a great day.